I love that like you're a man of faith. Like I'm a pretty spiritual person.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that a lot of times when you get these very heady people or these very like science forward people, that they tend to write off anything esoteric or mystical or spiritual. And I was listening to this guy. It was kind of like a debate between a physicist and like a preacher. And he was saying that basically the reason that he can't wrap his head around his God was because he was assuming that that God had to exist within time, space, and matter, and that the God that he was talking about exists beyond that. And then they were like, well, 10 years ago, you could never suggest that there was a pre-Bang universe, but now it's something that cosmologists are constantly talking about. So do you believe in a beginning, or do you believe in, I guess, what would your take on a pre-Bang universe be if there was one?
Well, I actually think that's the most interesting question in all of science, because it's the one that intersects with all other sciences. You can't have human life without, prebiotic, chemicals. You can't have those chemicals without a planetary system. You can't have the planetary system without a stellar life cycle. And you can't have the stellar life cycle without the origin of the elements themselves. Now, the question of the origin of the elements that's usually construed to be what we call the Big Bang. And in reality, the Big Bang is not necessarily time equals zero. So short answer to your question is we don't know. But I do think it's the most interesting question in all of science, because from any system that you ever look at, you can normally kind of feel like there's some direction that time is proceeding. In other words, if you look at you're driving down the road, your car, is speeding up. It gets a little warmer inside. The brakes start to heat. There's physical changes associated with your physical direction through space. And yet the laws of physics have no direction of time built into them. In other words, if I take you out far into the universe and I just show you this pendulum clock, grandfather clock swinging back and forth, you can't tell where did the pendulum start going. You can't tell the absolute time. You can only tell relative time. And so it's very interesting to think philosophically, if time did begin, how does time proceed when there is no time? In other words, when there's no way to move in a direction, that direction does not exist. How do you start going off in that direction? So that's very mysterious. And that has led people, along with this concomitant realization that the universe seems to embody a directionality and an asymmetry in the forward versus the reverse direction of time in certain processes. It's led people to think, well, maybe the universe had a pre-existing state. And those models are actually much older than the Big Bang. For example, Einstein didn't believe in the Big Bang, even though it was a direct consequence of his laws of relativity. He called that atrocious for many years, until Edwin Hubble of the Hubble Space Telescope fame showed him up there in Pasadena and Mount Wilson. He showed him the expanding universe was an inescapable conclusion of the observation of galaxies in distant quadrants of the universe. So Einstein overthrew his preconceived notion, which was held by everybody for 2,000 years, 3,000 years, even going back to the ancient Egyptians. And just after the ancient Egyptians, rather, the Greeks felt this. But it turns out even older than that are sort of like these cyclic models where the universe kind of, goes through oscillations for all eternity. Now, what does that mean? And so where we see these things in our equations, which lead to what are called infinities or singularities, the proper way to think about those is like that marks an enormous question mark, a facet and a feature of our ignorance of this particular physical law. And what's great about human beings is we're never satisfied. We want to keep learning about these and understand from where did the universe emerge? Because it's not exactly that much more satisfying if I tell you, I put out videos once a week or so, just like solo videos explainer on my YouTube channel, for the layperson, but cutting edge scientific things. Today's video is we're talking on a Friday in mid-November. And it was about like, how do we know about this process that is purported to let the universe arise from nothing? In fact, there's a book on that very subject by Lawrence Krauss called The Universe from Nothing, in which, Candace, he presupposes the existence of the laws of physics and the existence of what are called quantum fields. And so is that nothing? Is that something? Is everything? So these are the most fascinating questions. So it's actually a very hotly debated field, and it happens to do with the type of cosmology that I do, which is studying the heat left over from the formation of the elements. It's the oldest light in the universe, and it's called the cosmic microwave background radiation. And there's a beach ball behind me that kind of has like a planetarium for that. It shows like all these little freckles and spots on it. And that is the oldest fossil relic that humans or any other species could ever detect in the form of light, but not in other forms. So we're always continuously looking to improve our vision back to the earliest moments that we could possibly peer into.